All right, it's time to say good afternoon to Dr. Joe Schwarcz, host of the Dr. Joe Show, which airs here Sundays at 3 p.m. He's also director of the McGill Office for Science and Society. Joe, today your note here says there's a plethora of anti-science laws being proposed in the U.S. Now, I just wondered when I saw that there's not a whole lot new here, is there? This is all part of, basically the new. What are we calling him, RFK, and what his plans are?
Well, what is new is that these laws are actually going to be passed.
Okay.
Some states are actually going to pass anti-fluoride laws, which will not only take fluoride out of the drinking water, but also prevent dentists from offering fluoride tablets to children. There are going to be laws that regulate vaccines in such a way that it will be difficult for some parents to get some vaccines. These are all in the offing, so this is no longer just a theoretical possibility.
Oh, I see. Okay.
These things are happening. So much of this is based on misinformation, and this is one of the challenges that we in the scientific community, especially, those of us who fight misinformation, face, how to do it. And I was just at a conference in Toronto, and this was one of the topics that came up for discussion is how do you go about changing people's minds? Because, when you talk to people who are convinced that vaccines are dangerous or that seed oils are poisonous, how do you go about changing their minds? And it was very interesting discussion. And one thing that, we all concluded is that you don't win any arguments by trying to hit people over the head with facts. It just doesn't work. Because what happens then is that they just dig in further. The thing is that people generally put their own link with people and groups who surround them, and the sense of their own knowledge. They put it ahead of rationality. Nobody likes to think that they're out of step with others. And generally, when the anti-vaxxers and all these anti-people are in their own echo chambers, they don't want someone from the outside coming in and telling them that they're wrong, because they identify with the members of their own group. And it's sort of a backfire effect, and I certainly have found that, is when you try to use facts to try to convince people, there's this backfire effect where they just dig in further. So it's just not the way to do it. And yelling is not the way to do it. So the question is, how do you do it? And there was some very interesting discussion about this. And a paper came up that was published in the UK by, I think it was a philosopher who studied this question. And he said, look, there is one question that you can ask when you are trying to convince someone, and that will give you a step up. Here it is. So this is the question that you're supposed to ask when you're in a debate with someone or try getting into it. I was interested in what you're saying. Can you tell me more about how you came to think of that? I think this is true, and I have found this in my own debates with people, is you've got to give them the chance to try to explain to you how they came to their belief. And then you have an opening, because then you can kind of, ask further questions about why do you think that is really reliable? And you come back then with why you think whatever you're saying is reliable, and that gets you into the published peer-review literature, which, as you know, is the altar that we scientists worship at.
Yeah.
Sometimes too much, because obviously just because it's peer-reviewed doesn't mean that it's set in stone. But then it at least gives you a chance to explain how we in the scientific community think we know what we know, because it is based on experts having looked at the information and having to come to some sort of consensus. And then when you ask questions about, let's say vaccines, and you ask them, well, how did you come to know that? And they say, well, Kennedy told us this. And then you ask, well, how come Kennedy has this view? Where do you think he gets this information? Can you point at any kind of scientific research paper that backs that? And, of course, they can't, because there is no scientific paper that backs that. I mean, vaccination is probably the single most important medical advance in history. It has saved millions and millions of lives. I mean, it's absurd that we're still debating that. So, but by, getting them to see where they get their own information, and then you can have a step up. So I think this idea of getting to debate people and then say, yeah, I'm interested in what you're saying. Can you tell me more about how come you think that? Where did you get this information? And that works much better than starting to reel off facts.
Sure.
And,
of course, today, part of the answer to that question, I saw it on the internet, I saw it on social media, someone put, and I see this every day, Joe, you kind of sit there and shake your head. You brought up seed oils when you started, your explanation. Just yesterday, someone else, a big headline on a page, seed oils will kill you kind of. I know people look at that because, it's glaring, it's in your face, and you think, well, this must be the case. Otherwise, why would they write about it?
It is. And, unfortunately, we live in an age where the social media, of course, becomes its own echo chamber, and they're constantly repeating things. And sometimes just repetition makes something seem true. This has been called the Goebbels philosophy, which during the Nazi era, Goebbels kept saying all of the horrific things, that Jews are responsible for everything. And just by repetition, it became true, and people believed it. And we are seeing this. I mean, of course, we see this from Trump. He keeps repeating everything. They're all lies, but repetition makes them sound true. So this business of how you fight back against all of this is extremely challenging. But I think this philosophy of coming up with questions of your own and trying to guide them down the right path so that they realize that the information that they're getting doesn't really come from any reputable source.
Can I ask you, with respect, you mentioned the fluoridation, some states will go ahead and remove this now and take it away from dentists. Where does this come from? I mean, I thought, if we go back, I don't want to appear to be ignorant here, but if we go back, a generation ago, the idea was let's put fluoride in the water. It's good, works against tooth decay. It's better for kids. When was this fight lost? What happened?
It started right at the beginning. As soon as the idea of putting fluoride into water was introduced, there was already opposition because the only context that people ever heard of fluoride was in rat poison. Because it was in rat poison, of course, at grotesquely high doses, nothing compared to the 0.7 parts per million that you put into water. And there's a classic example of this in Kingston, New York, halfway between Montreal and New York. Mm-hmm. That was the first town where water was to be fluoridated. And the date was announced when this would be done. And this was in the 1950s. And there were demonstrations to stop putting the rat poison, as they said, into the water. And the date came, and in the morning of that day, the phone started ringing off the hook at the water treatment facility with people complaining that their pots were turning black, that their food tasted different because it was cooked in fluoridated water, etc. And I'm sure you guessed the bottom line to the story. The equipment had not been installed on time, and there was no fluoride in the water. But so it goes back to the 1950s, this opposition, and it's just invalid. At the dose of 0.7 ppm, there's absolutely no problem with fluoride in the water, and it reduces tooth decay. And tooth decay is not just cosmetic. We now know that the health of the mouth is reflected in the health of the body. And you just have to look at Calgary. Calgary removed fluoride from water about 15 years ago because of a plebiscite. And what did they see? A tremendous increase in cavities in children, to the extent that this year they reinstituted putting fluoride back into water.
We got to leave it at that. It's amazing in the worst possible way, right, to consider. And that's such a great story, too, about the fluoride. People complaining because they've been led to believe one thing when it hadn't, in this particular case, hadn't even happened.
Absolutely.
There you go. All right.
Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much. Appreciate
Thanks, Aaron.
Take care.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Brian Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
Or the free iHeartRadio app.